The morning sun filtered through the windows of Pine Valley Elementary School as Officer Chen walked down the freshly polished hallway, her polished badge catching the light. Today was another school safety presentation, something she had done countless times before, but each visit brought its own unique moments and connections with the children. The multipurpose room buzzed with the excited chatter of third graders settling onto the floor. Officer Chen couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm, some waving eagerly at her uniform, others whispering to their friends about the shiny badge on her chest. As she set up her presentation materials, she noticed one particular little girl sitting cross-legged in the back corner, partially hidden behind her classmates. Unlike the other children who were fidgeting and chatting, this small girl sat unusually still. She wore a pink sweater that seemed a size too big, and her brown hair was tied in slightly uneven pigtails, suggesting she had done them herself. What caught Officer Chen's attention most was the way the child would look up at her with intense curiosity, only to quickly glance away whenever their eyes met. The presentation started like any other. Officer Chen talked about stranger danger, internet safety, and the importance of telling trusted adults if something didn't feel right. She used her friendly officer voice, warm enough to make the children comfortable, but authoritative enough to convey the importance of her message. The kids responded with their typical mix of raised hands and eager questions about her police car and if she had ever caught any bad guys. Throughout the talk, she kept noticing that same little girl. While other students wriggled and whispered, she remained focused, absorbing every word. There was something in her expression that Officer Chen had seen before during her years working with children. A look that went beyond simple interest, a look that suggested she was hearing something she desperately needed to hear. As she discussed the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong, the girl's hands tightened around her knees, knuckles turning slightly white. When Officer Chen mentioned that police officers are here to help keep everyone safe, especially children, she saw the girl's eyes fill with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Years of experience had taught Officer Chen to trust her instincts. Something about this child's behavior set off quiet alarm bells in her mind. It wasn't anything obvious, no visible bruises or signs of neglect. It was subtler than that. The way she flinched slightly when other kids moved too quickly near her, how she seemed to make herself as small as possible, the constant checking of the room's exits. The presentation wrapped up with the usual excitement as Officer Chen handed out junior police badge stickers. The children formed a somewhat chaotic line, bouncing and chattering as they waited for their turn. But her attention kept drifting to the quiet girl who hung back, watching the others with longing but hesitant to join in. As the teachers began gathering their classes to leave, Officer Chen noticed the girl lingering behind, clearly wanting to approach but struggling to find the courage. She pretended to busy herself with packing up her materials, creating an opportunity for the child to take her time. Sometimes, she knew, the most important moments in her job came from these quiet spaces between the official parts of her day. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever. But for now, it was just a gentle moment in a sunny school hallway, a dedicated police officer, a hesitant child, and the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. As the last few students filed out of the multipurpose room, Officer Chen noticed the small girl in the pink sweater purposefully falling behind her classmates. Her teacher was busy helping another student tie his shoelace, creating a brief moment of opportunity. The girl's footsteps were nearly silent as she approached, clutching her junior police badge sticker with trembling fingers. Officer Chen knelt down to the child's level, something she always did to appear less intimidating to young ones. The girl's eyes darted nervously between the officer's face and the floor, her lower lip caught between her teeth. Up close, Officer Chen could see that the child's fingernails were bitten down to the quick, a common sign of anxiety she'd observed many times before. "Did you enjoy the presentation?" Officer Chen asked softly, keeping her voice gentle and warm. The girl nodded slightly but remained silent, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Something was clearly weighing heavily on her young mind. You know, Officer Chen continued, pretending to organize some papers. Sometimes people have questions they're scared to ask in front of everyone else. That's perfectly okay. We can talk just the two of us if you'd like. The child glanced over her shoulder, checking if anyone was watching. Her teacher was now helping another student with a stuck zipper, while the rest of the class waited by the door. The moment felt suspended in time, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. Finally, the girl took a tiny step closer. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, so quiet that Officer Chen had to lean in slightly to hear. "My daddy has a special room," she murmured, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He says I'm not allowed to tell anyone about the pictures of other kids." Officer Chen's heart began to race, but her face remained calm and reassuring. Years of training kicked in as she maintained a gentle expression, knowing that her reaction in this moment was crucial. She watched as the girl's shoulders hunched slightly, as if expecting to be dismissed or scolded for speaking up. "You're very brave for telling me this," Officer Chen said quietly, making sure to maintain eye contact while keeping her body language open and non-threatening. "Can you stay and talk with me for just a few more minutes?" The girl's eyes widened with a mix of relief and fear. It was clear that sharing this secret had taken enormous courage, but also that she was terrified of the consequences. Officer Chen could see the internal struggle playing across her young face, the desperate need to talk battling with years of enforced silence. Just then, the teacher noticed her student hadn't joined the line. "Time to go, sweetie," she called out cheerfully. The girl jumped slightly at the sound, her whole body tensing. Officer Chen smoothly stood up and walked over to the teacher, her movements deliberately casual. "Would it be all right if she helps me pack up some of my presentation materials? I could bring her to class in a few minutes." Her tone was light, but her eyes conveyed a deeper message to the experienced teacher, who nodded understanding. As the rest of the class left the room, the girl remained rooted to her spot, twisting the hem of her oversized sweater. The weight of her secret seemed to press down on her small shoulders, but there was also a hint of relief in her eyes, the kind that comes when a heavy burden is finally shared. Officer Chen knew that the next few minutes would be critical. This brave child had taken the first, terrifying step toward breaking a silence that should never have been imposed on her. Now, it was up to the officer to handle this delicate situation with the perfect balance of sensitivity and professionalism, knowing that everything she'd learned in her years of service had prepared her for precisely this moment. Over the next few days, the school's bright art room became a sanctuary of sorts. Officer Chen worked closely with Mrs. Thompson, the school counselor, a warm-hearted woman with 20 years of experience helping children through difficult times. They created a safe space where the little girl could express herself without pressure. On the first day, they simply sat together, coloring with bright markers and talking about favorite cartoon shows. The girl chose purple for almost everything she drew. Her favorite color, she explained in a whisper. She sketched butterflies and clouds, careful to stay within the lines, as if afraid of making any mistakes. "You're quite the artist," Mrs. Thompson commented warmly, watching as the girl added tiny details to her butterfly's wings. The child's shoulders relaxed slightly at the praise, though her eyes still darted to the door whenever footsteps passed in the hallway. Officer Chen visited during these sessions, sometimes in casual clothes instead of her uniform, to help the girl feel more comfortable. She brought along her own coloring book one day, purposely coloring outside the lines and making the girl giggle for the first time, a sound that lit up the whole room. During their third meeting, while they were making friendship bracelets with colorful threads, the girl began sharing small details about her home life. She spoke about her mother, who worked long hours at the hospital and always smelled like clean sheets and hand sanitizer. Her voice grew quieter when mentioning her father, a man who owned a computer shop downtown and was always praised by everyone in their neighborhood for his charity work. "He helps lots of kids with their computers," she said, her small fingers fumbling with the bracelet threads. But sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds from his special room. He gets angry if anyone tries to go in there." Mrs. Thompson and Officer Chen exchanged brief glances, maintaining their calm expressions while their concern deepened. They let the girl lead the conversation, never pushing, always listening. When she grew quiet, they returned to crafting, giving her space to gather her thoughts. During their art sessions, other pieces of the puzzle emerged naturally. The girl drew pictures of her house, including a detailed view of her father's office with a door she marked with a black X. She mentioned how her father had many important friends who visited late at night, and how she wasn't allowed to come downstairs during these visits. "You're doing so well," Officer Chen assured her one afternoon as they shaped clay into little animals. "Everything you tell us helps us understand better." The girl's hands steadied slightly at these words, and she managed a small smile. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a careful investigation was taking shape. Officer Chen documented every conversation, every drawing, working with child protection specialists to build a clear picture. The girl's mother was discreetly contacted and brought into the loop, her shock and disbelief handled with gentle professionalism by the team. As trust grew stronger, the girl began bringing small tokens to their sessions, a favorite hair clip, a lucky penny, things that seemed to give her courage. Each item had a story, and through these stories, more details emerged about her home life and her father's activities. One particularly meaningful moment came when the girl presented Officer Chen with a carefully made friendship bracelet, all in purple. "It's for protection," she whispered, her voice stronger than before. "Like how you protect people." The days turned into weeks, and subtle changes appeared in the girl's demeanor. She sat a little straighter, spoke a little louder, and her drawings began to include more colors besides purple. Though still cautious, she was beginning to understand that there were adults who would listen and believe her. What started as a whispered secret was slowly transforming into a foundation of trust, built one gentle conversation at a time. But as the girl grew more confident in sharing her story, no one could predict the storm that was about to break, or how her small act of courage would soon expose a darkness that had been hiding in plain sight. In the quiet back room of the police station, Officer Chen spread out her case notes across the worn wooden table. Coffee cups dotted the surface as she and her team worked late into the evening, carefully piecing together the puzzle that was unfolding before them. The computer repair shop downtown had seemed ordinary enough from the outside. A simple storefront with a neon OPN sign and window displays of laptops and tablets. Detective Rogers, a veteran officer with graying hair and kind eyes, tapped his pen against a stack of papers. "The business records look clean at first glance," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Too clean, actually. Almost like they've been carefully maintained to avoid attention." He pointed to several bank statements showing regular charitable donations to youth organizations. Officer Chen nodded, remembering how the little girl had mentioned her father's frequent work with children's groups. "He's built quite a reputation in the community," she said softly. "The perfect cover, really. Everyone sees him as the generous business owner who helps kids learn about computers." The team had discovered that the shop owner had moved 3 times in the past 7 years, each time following a similar pattern. He would establish himself in a new community, build up his business, get involved in youth programs, and then suddenly relocate, citing business opportunities elsewhere. A young technical analyst named Officer Lee joined them, carrying a laptop. "I've been looking into his internet activity at the shop," she said, her face serious. "He's using sophisticated encryption software, way more complex than what you'd need for a regular computer repair business." The room grew quieter as they discussed the patterns emerging from their investigation. The shop's visiting hours were unusual, with appointments often scheduled late in the evening. Several customers seemed to visit regularly, but never brought in any devices for repair. "We need to be extremely careful with how we proceed," Detective Rogers warned, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "One wrong move, and we could lose any chance of gathering concrete evidence. He glanced at the photo of the little girl that had been paperclipped to the file, a school portrait showing a hesitant smile and eyes that had seen too much. Officer Chen stood up and walked to the evidence board, where timeline cards and connection strings created a web of information. She added a new note about the secret room the girl had mentioned. The mother works night shifts at the hospital, she said. She's noticed some strange things, but had no reason to suspect anything serious. She trusted him completely. As days passed, the team worked methodically, building their case piece by piece. They interviewed former neighbors from previous locations, checked old police reports, and carefully monitored the shop's activities. Each new piece of information confirmed their growing suspicions, but they needed more than just circumstantial evidence. One breakthrough came when they discovered a pattern in the shop's internet usage. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., there were significant spikes in data transfer. These coincided with the times the girl had mentioned hearing strange sounds from the secret room. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. Officer Chen continued her regular duties, including her visits to the school, knowing that any change in routine might alert the shop owner that something was amiss. Each time she saw the little girl in the hallway, her heart ached with the weight of responsibility, the need to move quickly balanced against the necessity of building an airtight case. Late one evening, as the team reviewed their progress, Officer Chen's phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Thompson, the school counselor. The girl had drawn something during their session that day, a detailed picture of the secret room's door, complete with what looked like a keypad lock. It was another crucial piece of evidence, carefully added to their growing file. The investigation felt like holding a live wire. Dangerous if handled wrongly, but impossible to let go. They knew that somewhere behind that shop's ordinary facade, behind the owner's carefully crafted public image, something dark was hiding. And time was becoming increasingly precious as they worked to uncover the truth before any more harm could be done. The morning started like any other at Pine Valley Elementary, with children's laughter echoing through the hallways and backpacks being stuffed into cubbies. But when Officer Chen walked into the counselor's office for her regular check-in, she immediately noticed something was wrong. Mrs. Thompson sat at her desk, her usually cheerful face drawn with worry. "She's different today," the counselor said quietly, glancing at the small figure huddled in the reading corner. The little girl wore a long-sleeved sweater despite the warm weather, clutching her purple notebook like a shield. Her eyes, usually bright despite her shyness, looked dull and frightened. Officer Chen approached carefully, sitting on one of the small chairs nearby. "I brought some new coloring books," she said gently, placing them on the table. The girl didn't move toward them, something that had never happened before. Instead, she pulled her sleeves down further over her hands. "Would you like to tell us what's bothering you today?" Mrs. Thompson asked, keeping her voice soft and steady. The girl shook her head at first, then looked up at Officer Chen with tears beginning to form in her eyes. "He knows," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Daddy saw me talking to you yesterday when you visited the school. He said," her voice caught, "he said I was being a bad girl for telling stories." A tear rolled down her cheek as she spoke. Officer Chen felt her heart race, but maintained her calm exterior. With gentle encouragement, the girl slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing finger-shaped bruises on her arm. The marks told a story of angry hands and broken trust, of a father's fury at discovering his daughter's courage. Mrs. Thompson quietly excused herself to make a necessary phone call, while Officer Chen stayed with the girl. "You're not bad," she'd assured her, fighting to keep her own voice steady. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met." The girl looked up, her eyes searching Officer Chen's face. "He was so angry," she continued, her words coming faster now. "He spent all night in his special room. I heard lots of clicking sounds, like when he's working on computers. And he made phone calls. He kept saying everything had to go away." Officer Chen recognized the urgency in these words. The father was destroying evidence, covering his tracks. Years of experience told her they needed to act fast, but first, she had to ensure this brave child's safety. Sometimes, Officer Chen said carefully, being brave means letting other people help keep us safe. Would you like that? To go somewhere safe with your mom for a little while. The girl's fingers relaxed slightly on her notebook. Mom cried a lot last night, she revealed. She told Daddy she saw things on his computer when he forgot to close it. They fought really loud. Within hours, a carefully orchestrated plan was set in motion. The girl's mother, who had already been secretly cooperating with the investigation, was contacted. Social services arranged for them to stay with a relative in another town. Everything had to happen quickly but carefully, ensuring both mother and daughter would be well away from harm before any action was taken at the house. As Officer Chen helped the girl pack a few belongings from her classroom, including her treasured art supplies and purple friendship bracelet, she noticed a change in the child's demeanor. Though still frightened, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, the kind that comes from finally seeing an end to a long darkness. Will you keep my drawings safe? The girl asked suddenly, holding out her notebook. Daddy might find them at home. Officer Chen carefully took the notebook, now a vital piece of evidence, and promised to protect it. Each crayon-drawn page could help bring justice, but more importantly, they represented this child's first steps toward freedom and healing. As she watched the girl leave with her mother and the social worker, Officer Chen knew the next few hours would be crucial. The father's suspicious behavior suggested he was preparing to run, destroying evidence as he went. The team had to move quickly, but they also had to move smart. Too much was at stake to make any mistakes now. The sun had barely set when the police vehicles rolled silently into position around the computer repair shop and its connected house, their lights off to avoid drawing attention. Officer Chen sat in the lead car, her heart beating steadily as she watched the upstairs windows where a dim light glowed from what she knew to be the home office. Detective Rogers' voice crackled softly over the radio. All units in position. Remember, primary target is the office area. Tech team ready for immediate equipment shutdown. The weight of the search warrant felt heavy in Officer Chen's pocket, a document that had taken careful hours to obtain, every detail triple-checked to ensure it would hold up in court. Through her binoculars, she could see movement inside. The shop owner was still there, shadows passing behind curtained windows. According to their surveillance, he hadn't left the building for almost 24 hours, unusual for someone who typically made several business trips each day. On my mark, Detective Rogers said quietly. Officer Chen took a deep breath, thinking of the little girl now safely away with her mother. This moment wasn't just about making an arrest. It was about giving that child back her childhood. The operation moved with precise coordination. As officers approached from all sides, others secured the perimeter, ensuring no evidence could be destroyed or removed. The tech team stood ready with specialized equipment to prevent any remote data deletion. The front door burst open under controlled force. Police. Search warrant. The calls echoed through the building as officers moved swiftly inside. The shop owner was found in his office, frantically typing at his computer. When officers entered, he froze, his face shifting from shock to resignation in seconds. Officer Chen headed straight for the secret room the girl had drawn so carefully in her purple notebook. The door was hidden behind a large filing cabinet, just as described, with a sophisticated keypad lock. The tech team made quick work of it, revealing a space that made even seasoned officers pause. The room was a maze of computers, servers, and hard drives, all humming with activity. Multiple monitors displayed code and encrypted data. It was far more sophisticated than any ordinary computer repair shop would need. Evidence bags were quickly filled with storage devices, laptops, and documents. Check the floorboards by the west wall. Officer Chen called out, remembering a detail from one of the girl's drawings, a tiny square she had marked with special attention. An officer found a loose board containing several external hard drives and USB sticks, carefully hidden. As the evidence collection continued, Officer Chen noticed a wall of awards and certificates, recognition for the shop owner's work with youth organizations. The sight made her stomach turn, knowing now how these connections had been used. Each frame represented not achievement, but betrayal of trust. The shop owner sat handcuffed in a police car, his carefully built facade crumbling. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, calls from other members of his network, unaware that their time was also running out. Each call was logged, each number noted for the expanding investigation. Hours passed as forensic teams documented everything. Dawn was breaking when Officer Chen finally stepped outside, breathing in the cool morning air. She texted Mrs. Thompson, "It's done. They're safe now." The counselor would know how to share the news appropriately with the little girl and her mother. In her pocket, Officer Chen still carried the purple friendship bracelet the girl had given her. She touched it briefly, a reminder of why nights like this were necessary. This raid would have ripple effects far beyond one family or community. The evidence gathered would help protect countless other children. As she watched the sun rise, Officer Chen thought about the courage it had taken for one small voice to speak up, setting all of this in motion. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest whispers. The hard work was just beginning. There would be interviews, evidence processing, and a long road through the justice system. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of one simple truth. A brave little girl would sleep safely tonight. The small apartment provided by Victim Services felt temporary but safe. Sunlight streamed through new curtains, warming the living room where the little girl sat drawing with fresh-colored pencils. Her mother moved quietly in the kitchen, the sound of coffee brewing mixing with morning radio music, simple sounds that felt like the beginning of healing. A week had passed since the raid. The mother stood by the window, watching the street below with tired eyes. She hadn't slept well since that night, her mind constantly replaying years of memories, searching for signs she should have seen. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on her shoulders, though everyone assured her she wasn't to blame. "I made you something," the little girl called out, holding up a drawing. It showed their new apartment, filled with bright colors, and notably no dark corners or hidden rooms. Her mother smiled, noticing how her daughter's artwork was slowly changing, becoming brighter, more open. Mrs. Thompson visited regularly, bringing books and art supplies. During today's visit, she sat with them at their small dining table, helping them navigate their new reality. "It's okay to feel confused," she explained gently to the mother. "Everything you thought you knew has changed. Give yourself time to process it all." The girl looked up from her coloring. "Is it okay that I sometimes miss home?" she asked quietly, voicing a feeling that had been troubling her. "Not him, just my room and my books." "Of course it is," Mrs. Thompson assured her. "Those were your things, your memories. Missing them doesn't make you bad." The girl nodded, returning to her drawing with slightly lighter shoulders. Their neighbors in the apartment complex were kind but didn't ask questions, respecting their privacy. An elderly lady down the hall sometimes brought over fresh-baked cookies, her gentle presence offering comfort without demands for explanation. The mother struggled most with the community's reaction. News had spread quickly through their old neighborhood, despite efforts to keep details private. Former friends called constantly, expressing shock and disbelief. Some offered support, others demanded explanations she couldn't give. Eventually, she changed her phone number, creating another boundary between past and present. Officer Chen checked in regularly, updating them on the case's progress while being careful not to share too many details. She noticed small improvements each time she visited. More personal touches in the apartment, fewer startled reactions to unexpected noises, the gradual return of smiles. The girl had started seeing a child psychologist, Dr. Wilson, who specialized in helping young trauma survivors. Their sessions involved play therapy and art, giving her safe ways to express feelings too complex for words. Sometimes, she created stories about butterflies breaking free from cocoons, a metaphor that brought tears to her mother's eyes. One afternoon, while sorting through some boxes they'd brought from their old house, the mother found a family photo album. She sat on the floor, turning pages slowly, trying to reconcile the smiling man in the pictures with the truth she now knew. The little girl found her there and simply sat beside her, leaning against her arm in quiet support. "We'll make new pictures," the girl said softly, wisdom beyond her years in her voice. Her mother hugged her close, amazed by her child's resilience and strength. Support groups became a lifeline for both of them. The mother found comfort in meeting other parents who understood her confusion and pain. The girl joined a children's group where she could play with others who didn't expect her to explain her story. Slowly, they were learning that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding ways to move forward. Their apartment began to feel more like home. New routines emerged: morning walks to the nearby park, evening story time, weekend baking sessions. The mother enrolled in computer classes at the local community center, determined to understand the digital world better. Her daughter watched her study with pride, seeing how they both were learning to be stronger. As weeks passed, the raw edges of their pain began to soften. There were still difficult moments, nightmares, sudden tears, overwhelming memories. But there were also new joys. The first time they both laughed without feeling guilty, the day they adopted a small cat from the shelter, the evening they finally felt safe enough to order pizza delivery. They were learning that healing isn't a straight line, but a winding path with steps forward and back. Yet each day brought small victories, tiny moments of progress that proved they were moving in the right direction, away from shadows and toward light. The courthouse stood tall and imposing against the morning sky. Officer Chen adjusted her formal uniform as she waited outside the main entrance. Today marked the beginning of a trial that would impact not just one family, but communities across several states. Inside, the mother sat quietly in the witness preparation room, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. The prosecutor, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes and a determined spirit, reviewed their preparation one last time. They had spent weeks getting ready for this moment, ensuring every detail would be presented clearly and accurately. "Remember," the prosecutor said softly, "you're doing this to protect not just your daughter, but many other children too." The mother nodded, drawing strength from these words. Her daughter was safe at school today, surrounded by supportive teachers and friends, deliberately shielded from the courthouse proceedings. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically: the sophisticated computer network discovered in the hidden room, the encrypted files, the connections to other suspects across state lines. But more than just technical details, she spoke about trust betrayed and innocence stolen. The defense lawyer tried to paint a picture of a misunderstood businessman, but the evidence was overwhelming. Detective Rogers presented the technical findings, explaining in simple terms how the computer repair shop had served as a front for something far more sinister. When the mother took the stand, she spoke with quiet strength about the changes she had noticed in her daughter: the late-night sounds from the office, the gradual isolation from family and friends. Her voice trembled, but never broke as she described the moment she discovered the truth about her husband's activities. The evidence from the raid proved crucial. The tech team had managed to recover deleted files and decode encrypted messages, revealing a network that spread far beyond their small town. Each piece of evidence represented hours of careful police work, all triggered by one child's brave whisper. During a lunch break, Officer Chen stepped outside for fresh air. She thought about the little girl who had started all this, now flourishing in her new school, slowly rediscovering how to just be a child. The purple friendship bracelet was still on her wrist, a constant reminder of why this work mattered. The trial continued for 2 weeks. More witnesses came forward: other parents, technology experts, child protection specialists. Each testimony added another piece to the puzzle, revealing the full scope of the operation that had been hidden behind the respectable facade of a small-town business. The defense tried to challenge the search warrant, questioning the reliability of a child's testimony. But the careful documentation of every interview, every drawing, every piece of evidence proved unshakable. The prosecution had built their case methodically, leaving no room for doubt. On the final day, the jury took only 3 hours to reach their verdict. The courtroom was silent as they filed back in, the tension palpable. When the word guilty was read out on multiple counts, the mother closed her eyes, tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. The judge's sentence was severe, 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release. But the impact stretched beyond one person's punishment. The evidence gathered led to investigations in 12 other states, unraveling a network that had operated in shadows for years. After the verdict, Officer Chen found the mother sitting quietly in the courthouse corridor. "He can't hurt anyone else now," the mother said softly, her voice steady despite her tears. They shared a moment of understanding. This ending was also a beginning. Later that evening, Officer Chen called Mrs. Thompson to share the news. The counselor would know how to tell the little girl, using words she could understand, emphasizing that she was safe and that her courage had helped protect other children. As the sun set on the courthouse steps, Officer Chen thought about all the people who had worked tirelessly on this case. The detectives, prosecutors, counselors, and most importantly, one brave little girl who dared to speak up. Justice had been served, but more than that, a message had been sent. Every voice, no matter how small, deserved to be heard and protected. 1 year later, the little park near their new home bloomed with spring flowers. The girl, now taller and more confident, chased butterflies while her mother watched from a nearby bench. Their new life had taken root in this peaceful neighborhood, far from the shadows of their past. The morning sun caught the silver charm bracelet on the girl's wrist, a recent gift celebrating her successful completion of therapy with Dr. Wilson. Each charm represented a milestone in her healing journey: a butterfly for transformation, a star for courage, a heart for self-love, and a tiny key symbolizing her freedom to move forward. Their new house, though modest, felt like a true home. Bright artwork covered the walls, many pieces created during therapy sessions. The girl's room was painted yellow, her new favorite color, with a window seat where she loved to read and draw. No more hidden rooms, no more secrets. Every space was open and filled with light. The mother had found her own path to healing. She now worked as a volunteer coordinator at a children's advocacy center, using her experience to help other families navigate similar journeys. Her quiet strength and empathy made her particularly good at supporting parents struggling with guilt and confusion. Officer Chen still visited occasionally, though now more as a friend than a protector. Today was special. She was joining them for a small celebration. The girl had been chosen to speak at her school's assembly about personal safety, sharing her story in a way that could help other children understand the importance of speaking up. "Look what I made in art class," the girl called out, running to show Officer Chen a colorful painting. It showed a garden full of butterflies, each one representing a child who had been helped because of her courage to speak up. The investigation had led to the rescue of 17 other children across different states, though the girl only knew that her actions had helped protect others like her. Their old neighborhood felt like a distant memory now. The computer repair shop had been transformed into a children's advocacy center, turning a place of darkness into one of healing and hope. The mother sometimes drove past it on her way to volunteer work, feeling not pain, but pride in how something good had grown from their experience. Mrs. Thompson had retired from school counseling, but still sent cards on special occasions. Her latest note sat on their refrigerator: "Your courage changes lives every day." The girl had decorated the card with stickers, adding her own touch of joy to the message. The local police department had implemented new training programs, using lessons learned from this case to better recognize signs of hidden abuse. Officer Chen often shared the story, with details carefully protected. During these sessions, emphasizing how one child's whispered words could unveil truth and bring justice. As they sat in the park that morning, sharing sandwiches and watching butterflies, the mother marveled at her daughter's resilience. The quiet, frightened child of a year ago had blossomed into a confident young person who used her experience to help others. She still had moments of sadness or anxiety, but she had learned healthy ways to handle these feelings. "Mom," the girl said suddenly, "remember when I used to only use purple for everything?" She was sketching in her notebook, using all the colors of the rainbow. "I like all the colors now. It's like my heart got bigger and had room for more happiness." Officer Chen smiled, touching the faded purple friendship bracelet she still wore on her wrist. It reminded her daily that even in law enforcement, the biggest changes often start with the smallest voices. Their story had become more than just a case file. It was a testament to the power of speaking truth, to the strength found in healing, and to the importance of believing children when they share their fears. In schools across the state, new programs helped students understand they had the right to feel safe and the power to speak up. As the afternoon sun warmed the park, the girl gathered wildflowers, weaving them into a crown. She placed it on her mother's head, both of them laughing at this simple moment of joy. Their laughter carried on the spring breeze, the sound of healing, of hope, and of the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who had faced darkness together and emerged stronger in the light.